What's up, Internet? I'm here to mourn the loss of the Xbox 360 marketplace. It is shut down and will not be brought back. As an archivist, this hurts me greatly because that means that, at least officially, wink, there are no ways to get any of these games that were taken away. They're just gone forever, and that means that important pieces of history and artistry are just lost in the void. But what hurts me just as much is the knowledge that there's going to be some people out there that will completely write off the Xbox 360 as a console in its entirety now. The idea that, well, the online marketplace is gone and I have a PS3 and everything worthwhile on the Xbox 360 is available on the Xbox One. And the fact is, that bothers me. The idea that this console will be potentially entirely written off by people just because of the loss of the digital marketplace, which was already massively cut down by this point anyway. Last year, I made a video on the remaining time on the Xbox 360 marketplace, and the games I felt were really worth your time on there to grab before it was gone entirely. And now that it's gone, I want to make a point to try and talk about awesome games that are still available for the system. I want to make a list to help inform potential people who are interested in getting into the Xbox 360, or alternatively, people who have completely written off the system as being entirely worthless now. Because there are things on the system you can still get that are only available there. So that's what this list is going to be. This is the top 10 games you need an Xbox 360 to play. To clarify, we're talking console exclusives here, so they could be on Steam or something, I guess. But, you know, I'm primarily a console guy anyway, so why not? But they're also not going to be on PS3, as well, to make things more challenging for me, not backwards compatible on Xbox One. I had to do a lot of research on this one, but I think I came up with a list of pretty interesting games that I think would make for an interesting starting point for a collection if you're just getting into this system. And to be fair, you can get these at local thrift shops for like $10 now, so, you know, now's the time to do it, I guess. Either way, these are the top 10 games you need an Xbox 360 for. But of course, we gotta start with a couple of honorable mentions before we get into the list proper. The first honorable mention I want to bring up is Metro 2033. This game only gets an honorable mention though because it has been remade on other stuff, so it's technically not an exclusive. But I wanted to bring this up expressly because it was just a very personally important game to me. It is a first-person shooter that tries to talk a lot about philosophy and the human condition after an apocalyptic event has forced everyone in Russia into the subway tunnels to try and live out their days there while giant flying monsters take over the uninhabitable toxic surface. It's a fascinating game that has some really interesting moments that I really quite enjoyed, as well as some interesting visuals and set pieces that made it quite unique. There are some issues. First of all, it's based on a book and it has two endings, neither of which line up with the book. In fact, the plot actually diverges from the book in a few ways, but in order to get the good ending of the two, you have to do some really bloody, esoteric things, like just stand around listening to a bunch of random flavored dialogue between various NPCs, or finding a hidden corner with a guitar and playing it for some reason, all to make you more empathetic, I guess, is what they were going for. The way by which you actually get the good ending in this game is really strange and really awkward, but I've never seen an FPS like this. It's very stop and start, so if you're an action fiend, you'll probably want to skip this, but if you're in it for the story and you have an interest in philosophy and really, really solid writing, check this game out. It is quite special. The second honorable mention I want to bring up goes to Divinity 2 Dragon Knight Saga. And again, it's kind of only an honorable mention because of weird technicalities. Actually, two releases of this game. The first one, Divinity 2 Ego Draconis, is not backwards compatible on the Xbox One. However, its compilation with its expansion, which is known as Dragon Knight Saga, which I'm showing you here, is. So technically you can play this on an Xbox One if you get a specific version of it. But I wanted to bring this game up because it's really quite an awesome little game. Out of all the obscure RPGs on the Xbox 360, I think Divinity 2 is probably my favorite. It was by Larian, the people behind the other Divinity games, and of course, Baldur's Gate 3. But instead of it taking more of a top-down sort of tabletop look, it's more of a third-person experience, and that does a lot more for me personally, because it puts me in the shoes of my character a lot more, instead of just making me some guy playing as a character on a board. But it also opens up the world to make it just feel substantially bigger. It's a huge epic RPG where you wander around slaying enemies that do not respawn, and when you get bored of that, turn into a freaking dragon and just burn stuff down. It's like if Drakengard was on the Xbox 360, except that Nier already was and was a sequel to Drakengard, even though it played nothing like it. But now I get to bring up both Nier and Drakengard, and that's always a good feeling for me. Play all these games. They're just really good games. Basically, any game where you're bored and you can suddenly just turn into a dragon because you're bored and then just wreck stuff, it's a good day. Plus, this is a game where you can force a skeleton into an existential crisis and then he just shatters into dust. It's a really clever game. I like this one a lot. The third honorable mention goes to Battle Fantasia. Again, only on a technicality, it is on the PS3, but only digitally, and both because the PSN store is so abhorrently bad it crashes whenever you try and launch it, and the fact it definitely will go down sometime in the future means that, you know, if you're in North America, a physical Xbox 360 copy might be the way to go. This is an ArcSys fighting game, and I am awful at them, but it's beautiful, has a really cool art style, and I just love everything about it. It's a fun game, even if I can't play it to save my life because my hands don't work properly. I do enjoy these kind of fighting games, and the fact is, it's beautiful art style, it's a huge cast of fantastical, fairy tale kind of themed characters. I just love it. It's a good one. If you're looking for a fighting game on the Xbox 360, this wouldn't be the first one I'd recommend, certainly, but it's definitely one to look out for. Honorable mention number 4 goes to Sneak King. Okay, this isn't a good game, not at all. It's basically a meme at best, but it's silly and weird, and you can't get this experience anywhere else. Sneak King was one of many games released as a tie-in with Burger King, or Hungry Jack's if you're down under. And they had a bunch of different weird games. They had a racing game, they had a bumper car game, they had something else that I can't think of right now. And they had some weird tie-ins with like UFC fighting, from what I remember. In fact, one of those games had an achievement to be walked into the ring by the Burger King himself. Burger King also advertised in Burnout Paradise. I completely forgot about this, honestly. And had I not been playing so much of this while recording this, I would have completely just not known. You know what? Extra honorable mention to Burnout Paradise. It completely disregards all the rules. Seriously, I played this non-stop in between recording stuff, and it's still so damn good. And while we're just completely forsaking all the rules for the sake of just giving you more awesome games, play Viva Pinata. Too many people wrote off that game, and that is one of the most classic Xbox 360 games. Underappreciated and brilliant in both puzzle solving and life sim creation. Viva Pinata was brilliant, but out of every bit of weird Burger King inclusivity that the Xbox 360 had, Sneak King, I think, is by far the most iconic. It is basically Metal Gear Solid, but with the Burger King. The whole premise is that you sneak around waiting for people to get hungry and then terrify them with overpriced, probably under-quality fast food. And then, I don't know, maybe turn them into fast food? I've never been to Hungry Jack's, but maybe the Jack from Hungry Jack was actually Jack the Ripper. And that's why he has to hide in the big creepy king suit. That's why he was never properly identified. It makes so much sense. And the fact is, this is just such a bizarre concept. Like, making a branded game is nothing weird on the Xbox. There was tons of Doritos games out there, and some of them were actually pretty good. Still wish I could play the one where you play as a dinosaur chasing a Doritos truck. But playing as the Burger King, stalking random people just to harass them with your fast food to eventually give them a heart attack? It's an interesting concept. Sneak King is not a good game, not really by any means or measure, but it's a unique concept and it is entertaining as hell. It is dumb, it is silly, everyone needs to play Sneak King. Seriously, this game is amazing. Our final honorable mention, sorry, I know you want to get to the list proper, but seriously, there's just so many cool games to talk about, is Bullet Witch. Now, Bullet Witch is not the most fantastic game out there. It was a launch title, as I understand, and this version of it is probably the worst version to play, but it's still kind of interesting. It is a third-person shooter where you mix your giant staff rifle thingamabob with your magic to take out zombies and create all sorts of environmental destruction. This game has a lot of interesting ideas, but it plays at a wonky frame rate. Rapid firing your weapon feels just delayed and weird. And honestly, the Western release was completely bodged. Like, it feels, as I understand, in localization, I guess they thought that Westerners fetishize guns too much. So they made your guns kind of worthless. in this version, and that's a problem because that's like half your move set right there, and you need to use your gun in between using your magic, so if you can't really use your gun so much, it's a little bit not great, but it is an interesting, kind of stylish game where you basically play as Bayonetta's big sister. And hey, if you're a glass half full kind of guy, the Xbox 360 Western release is a built-in challenge mode right there that's exclusive to the system. All you get good bros and sisters, unite and enjoy Bullet Witch. I kind of like it. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, and it's interesting to see what they did for a very early Xbox 360 title. Not a fantastic game, but an interesting one. Definitely worth a play if you can find it cheap. And now that we're only almost 17 minutes into recording, we can start with the list proper with number 10. Universe at War. I am not much of an RTS guy. I don't really like strategy games in general beyond the tactics ogre games or XCOM, but this game was a lot of fun. I just played it for the first time just to, cover my bases and check all the games I had that would sort of be applicable to this, and it was a pretty solid little sci-fi RTS kind of game, and RTSs do not translate to consoles well. Like, they just don't. This one, I think, handled things about as well as could. It has a cool sort of War of the Worlds style approach where you're at least starting off as a bunch of humans fighting a bunch of space invaders, but there's also like a second group of like humanoids in mechs that are also kind of another faction in here. Again, I haven't gotten very far, but I was just impressed at how well this ran, and it's also important to note that this is kind of the only way to officially play this game now. It was available as a Games for Windows Live, and I know it was on Steam, but it's been taken down. If you want a cool RTS themed after War of the Worlds, the Xbox 360's got you covered, and this might be the only way to officially play this game in the future. The fact is, I'm not that good at this game. I didn't get very far, and that's probably why it's not any higher on this list, but it is an interesting experience, and it's one that's exclusive to the Xbox 360, and it's not that expensive. If you want a fun, interesting RTS that, isn't Halo Wars, which I played that, I was not that impressed with, check out Universe at War because it's pretty good. And heck, it's about as cheap as a sandwich nowadays. Not even $3 from what I can tell. This game is inexpensive and it's an interesting little experience. And creating an interesting Xbox 360 library, well, that's kind of the name of the whole game here. Number 9, Otomedius Excellent. I remember playing a lot of this with a friend of mine online, trying to teach me how to get better at shmups. It was a little hard for me because both my sticks don't auto-center and they never have, so my play is going to be unbelievably sloppy. Otomedius Excellent asks the bold and intrepid question, what if Gradius, but with anime schoolgirls? And if you wanted a new Gradius game, well, here you go. You got a bunch of different characters that all play differently. I found one character that I stuck with pretty much immediately. Good old Arnval. And you go around collecting little power-up capsules to power up your ship. You can do it manually or automatically if trying to manage power-ups as well as not dying is a little too complicated for you. And it's really just the embodiment of the classic Gradius idiom, you have to shoot the thing, so go do that thing. With schoolgirls, while flying on the beach, or over the ocean, or in a volcano while you fight a giant reference to Getsu Fumaden, because good old Konami, back when they were actually doing some interesting things. This is a sequel to a game that never came out in North America, to my understanding, but it is a pretty good game. It was available digitally, which is how I'm playing it, but it was also available physically, although I only ever saw 1 or 2 copies. It did not seem like the most common game ever, but it still seems to be pretty affordable on eBay, and just in general, if you like Gradius, it's a fun game. Just be aware it is on the slower end of shmups, and if horizontally scrolling shmups aren't your bag, this isn't going to do anything to change that. But if you want more Gradius, this is an interesting take on the whole Gradius formula, and I think just in general, it was a really fun game. The Xbox 360 had a lot of great shmups, and, well, that might be foreshadowing. Number 8, Blood Bowl. Look, I don't know jack about D&D. I don't know jack about tabletop games, and the only thing I know about Games Workshop is that their figures are so comically overpriced I will never be able to afford them. But what I can tell you is that Blood Bowl reminds me a lot of a fantastic little Genesis game called Mutant League Football, a game where you played hand egg as a bunch of monsters killing each other and just taking it to outrageous extremes. And Blood Bowl basically takes that concept and throws it into like a dice-based, turn-based game. And it's just a lot of fun to run around taking out opponents and trying to score goal points at the touchdown zone mabob thing. I will say that it was fun. I like this game a lot, and I know a lot of people who are really passionate about Blood Bowl that will vouch for this being a pretty good game. Heck, I knew someone who was so crazy about Blood Bowl, they desperately just got the DS version because it was the only way to play it, even though it was nowhere near as good as this. If you want a fun, tactical, strategic, turn-based game, this is an interesting take on a strategy game. It's done through the lens of an interesting sport. And if that doesn't interest you, well, you're sports monsters attacking each other while trying to actually play the game. So there's layers of interest here that could appeal to a lot of different people. The strategy people, the fantasy people, the tabletop people, the hand egg people. One way or the other, Blood Bowl is an interesting thing on the Xbox 360, and while there are later iterations of this game on later consoles that are probably better, if all you've got's a 360 and all you're doing is going for a physical collection, not that you have much of a choice now, yeah, this one's pretty fun, and it's an interesting take, and there really isn't anything quite like it on the 360. This game doesn't hit quite as much for me, but I will say that I had a lot of fun playing this for this recording, and I might play a lot more of this moving forward. Number 7 on our list, slightly less than 100 Nights. Let me make something perfectly clear here. I do not care for Dynasty Warriors. Okay, I don't care for Dynasty Warriors 2 and all the iterations of Dynasty Warriors 2 they continue to pump out to this day because they're just uncreative and really bland. But I do like all the knockoffs of Dynasty Warriors. For some reason, take away the Dynasty Warriors license and put in some effort there, Omega Force, and make something kind of interesting, and I actually kind of like it. Stuff like Sengoku Basara was interesting to me. And the one that really caught my attention here was 99 Nights. Okay, I'm gonna level with you. The one that really caught my attention was Bladestorm, but that's available on everything nowadays, so sorry Bladestorm, but you should totally go play Bladestorm. It's like the best Dynasty Warriors thing. It's kind of like a combination strategy thing. It's really, really good. 99 Nights is a hack and slash adventure where you play as numerous fantasy characters, killing hundreds and hundreds of dudes in every single stage. There's an interesting level up system where as you level up, you actually expand your move set, which is really interesting. So you might start with like 1 or 2 combos, but by level 2, you'll have a third and so on and so forth. So your move set is constantly expanding. You have like a super powered berserker state you can enter that lets you just decimate the entire battlefield in like the flashiest way possible. I like this game. It's a very simple, dumb action game, but sometimes you just want some dumb, mindless fun, and this one does it pretty well, and it feels gratifying and engaging to play, which is not something I get from any of the iterations of Dynasty Warriors 2 out there. I've not played the sequel to 99 Nights. I've heard it's not quite as good, but having played 99 Nights for a bit, I had a lot of fun with it. I think this was a good game, and it was totally worth the bargain bin price I paid 10 years ago at a GameStop for it. This one, if you can find it and you like action games, give it a go. If you like Dynasty Warriors, give it a go. If you don't like Dynasty Warriors, this one might actually change your mind. And if not, Sengoku Basara and Bladestorm have got your back. They're just not applicable to this list, but you should play them. Either way, 99 Nights is a fun, if fairly repetitive and basic action game, but, you know, sometimes you just need to have a good junk food game. And this one does it pretty well when Earth Defense Force isn't carrying all the weight of doing that because that game's amazing. Wow, I'm really going off track with this list, but seriously, too many awesome games, play them all. Number 6. I'm not terribly familiar with 3D Ninja Gaiden. Well, except for Yaiba and... we don't talk about Yaiba. But what I do have a little bit of experience with is Ninja Blade. And Ninja Blade is actually a pretty fun little hack and slash Rising Zan Samurai Gunman clone of sorts. You play as a ninja that wears a jockstrap on his face because I guess he's trying to cosplay as that bloke from Nier. Seriously, which one of these guys is from Ninja Blade and which one's from Nier? 9 out of 10 mathologists could not tell you. Are they the same person? I'm not even sure they know which one they are. They might be the same person for all we know, but we're fighting zombie things created by like a parasite virus as part of like a special ninja assault team that kind of goes sideways on its first mission. It's an interesting game and it goes some fun places. It's definitely a cheesy action movie time that shouldn't be taken terribly seriously, but it's fun. You got your standard weapon loadout of regular sword, faster dual swords, and a big heavy sword that's not very fun to use, but you need it to break off armor. It's a fun, dumb action-y time, and if you like dumb action movies and just fun ninja adventures, I think you gotta try this one out. It's a little wonky in places, especially when the game decides to take fixed camera angles, but outside of that, the gameplay is really, really fun. The only thing about it gameplay-wise that really bothers me is it has an overabundance of quick time events, and I mean, I'm not good at them, but it's really more a problem with pacing because they'll just instantly zoom in of your character's eyes and then suddenly all action stops just so you can do a quick time event. It just feels like it's kind of freezing a little bit and the pacing just feels very wonky at times. But if you are looking for a new action game for your Xbox 360, Ninja Blade is definitely one to look at. This one was a lot of fun. I got it at a garage sale for about $2 and I hadn't really played it until I started working on this list. And yet, I had a lot of fun with it. Just for the love of God, if you want a ninja game, stay away from Yaiba. It's a bad idea. I know it's cheap. My copy has about an inch thick of repricing stickers that ended up marking it down to like 99 cents. It's not worth it. Trust me on this one. Plus, I get to bring up Nier again. Awesome! Number 5. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wanted to play sci-fi anime Ace Combat in space? Well, if you did, go get a Japanese PS1 and go play Electrosphere because the North American version was terrible. But if all you've got is an Xbox 360, you might want to try Project Sylphid. This was a game I wanted to try for a very long time, and it was rather hard for me to track down. It's honestly probably the best arcadey flight sim that the Xbox 360 ever got, because Ace Combat on the system was awful. And the less said about Jane's Advanced Strike Fighter, the better. But this is a fun, action-y time in a cool sci-fi experience. Honestly, this whole thing feels like a Macross game without the license. You've got giant volleys of missiles to hurl at your opponents that will be sent your way as well, that you have to flip and roll your way through in the most stylish way imaginable. Honestly, aside from the fact you don't turn into a robot, it feels like a Macross game, and that's a lot of fun. As you go across your campaign, you'll unlock completely new weapons for your ship, and you can modify your own custom loadouts to create your awesome spaceship of choice as you take out other smaller ships in dogfights, as well as larger capital ships, just to make a point, because you're the best fighter pilot ever in space. It does have a very generic anime plot that's pretty much just better left ignored, but it is a fun arcadey flight sim, and it was probably the best flight sim that the Xbox 360 ever got. It's interesting, and the only reason I wouldn't recommend this is if you were honestly looking for another Sylphid game, because those were kind of isometric-y shmups, and this isn't really that, but I like it a lot. That said, it is a very unique game to the Xbox 360 library, and I would have loved to have seen a sequel to it, but unfortunately not. Number 4, a game with 4 in the title, so that works out well. It's Quake 4. One question, why is this not available on the Xbox One? Why has this not been remastered in some way? Seriously, Quake 1 and 2 are on Game Pass remastered. This one has not. This is not a perfect game by any means or measure. It plays at a very choppy frame rate, and it does feel a little off at times, but it's a very special game. It feels a bit like a mix of Half-Life 2, Doom, and the original Prey. It feels like it's trying to do some experimental things with its set pieces, and it's a lot of fun, although it is very stop and start because, well, this was how military shooters of its time were kind of like. You just have moments where you have to stand around and listen to people talk, and they'll block your way until you can progress. That I do not care much for. What I do care very much for is that this game absolutely oozes atmosphere. It has an amazing lighting system, and it just feels creepy to run around this environment. This game is really one of a kind on the Xbox 360, and the fact is that it hasn't been remade is just a crime. Look, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't played a ton of the games that preceded it, minus their N64 and Saturn versions, and I don't recommend those, but this is a very fun, very unique game on the Xbox 360, and while it does feel like it's trying to be a weird chimera of every other FPS kind of around the time, it still tells a really interesting story, and it has some very powerful moments in terms of gaming history. This game will actively show you how powerful it is to take away a player's control over their character in a moment that I feel like should be preserved forever just because of how powerful a teaching tool this moment is for game development. This game is a fun FPS, and it's a unique FPS. And look, if you're not into Quake 4, fine. If you buy an early copy of this, it came with a second disc that had Quake 2 on it. There. You get a whole second game that might appeal to you more. The fact is, Quake 4 is weirdly not available on really anything else. And it's a damn shame, because this game is kind of amazing for its time. This was a very early Xbox 360 game, but I am just genuinely very impressed by it. If I had to pick one FPS that's pretty much stuck on the Xbox 360 right now that you need to play, it would be this one, easily. Number 3, Wartech Senko no Round. This is one of the most interesting and bizarre games I've got in my Xbox 360 collection. I reviewed it about a decade ago, but this is just an interesting game I think everyone needs to experience because it's a very unique experience. This game posits, what would it feel like if you got to play the boss of a bullet hell shmup? And to be fair, nowadays you can just play Vampire Survivor to get the same experience, but before that, this was sort of all you had. This is a sort of top-down versus third-person shooter slash bullet hell shmup, where you can just suddenly choose to engage a superpower that makes your ship giant and you can just fill the screen with bullets. It almost feels kind of like an off-brand Virtual On or Gacha Force, but man, there's just nothing else like this game on the Xbox 360 or really many other consoles. At this point, the only other thing I can think of is its direct sequel, which is certainly more available, but this was something that showed up on the Xbox 360 kind of out of nowhere, has the most generic looking cover ever, and it's one of the most unique things you'll ever find. It's not perfect, certainly, but it's an interesting experience, and it's one that I always think of when I think of things you definitely need an Xbox 360 for. I love the idea of a versus bullet hell shmup where you can be just as much of a bullet hell generator as your opponents. To me, it just feels like an excellent cult game that more people need to know about. This game is absolutely strange in the best way possible, and it gives such a unique experience. And I think everyone should get to play this if they can. Number 2, Raiden Fighters Aces. Did I mention that the Xbox 360 has some awesome shmups on it? Because, yeah. I remember going to the GameStop and picking this up. I was either going to get this or Raiden 4, and I think I went with the right call here. This is not a good shmup. It is 3 excellent shmups in one that I paid not even $5 for. You get Raiden Fighters, Raiden Fighters 2, Raiden Fighters Jet. Between all 3 games, you get a metric crap ton of ships that all play a little bit differently, so there's definitely going to be one that appeals to you. It's vertical scrolling, so, you know, if Otomedius didn't do anything for you, well, now you got this. It's a lot of fun. And just chasing the endless scores is so much fun. You can make enemies drop these medals, which are what you get for points, but sometimes they'll just sort of like gravitate around you, and you can overlap them so that they get bigger and bigger, and you're trying to avoid them so that you can get a bigger payout at the end. There's some strategy to this as well, and it's just a series of really well-crafted shmups in one very nice, simple, clean package. This compilation is available on Steam. However, as I understand, that's not a very good version of it, which might still make this more or less the definitive way to play these games, short of MAME. This was my introduction to Raiden, and it was a hell of an introduction. It was 3 amazing games for a budget price, and it gave me hours and hours of fun. If you like shmups, this one is not one to be overlooked because it is one of the best I've ever played. But now we have number 1, which might very well be the best shmup I've ever played. Mushihime-sama Futari, and no, don't correct me and say this is on Steam or Switch, it's not. The predecessor is, this one isn't. Sorry, not to get hostile. I've been corrected on this so many times. I know what I'm talking about here. This is a sequel to the game that's on Switch and on Steam. And unfortunately, as of now, you kind of can't play the definitive version of this, at least in home consoles, because that was relegated to DLC that's no longer available. I will refer you to my previous list on the Xbox 360 store, where I talked about this because this game is the freaking gift that keeps on giving for these lists. This is one of the best crafted shmups I have ever played, and even without the DLC, you still have a bunch of different modes to play. My personal favorite is the Arrange mode, where you control 2 ships simultaneously, and you have to build up a score with each ship. But the thing is, the other ship acts as a shield for yours, burning through their score multiplier to act as a shield to deflect bullets for your ship. So you have to keep swapping them out, building up both score multipliers in order to keep yourself alive. It is an absolute unique experience and a total blast to play. It's a shame this is not more readily available. I'm very sad that this hasn't been remade in some way, shape, or form. Now, there is a technicality in all this, and that is that there is, at least theoretically, a way to play the Black Label version still, because there was an on-disc version of this made, as I understand. But, like I said, that purely lies in the realm of theoretical because there were only like 100 copies of that ever produced. So good luck with that. Unfortunately, you probably will have to settle for the regular version, which is still not cheap, but this is a cave shmup, which means it's one of the few games on Xbox 360 that was region free. So at the very least, you don't have to import a system in order to play it, which is remarkably friendly for Cave to have done that. Also to have made the DLC available in North America in the first place. But this game was remarkable, and it's sad that it wasn't more available everywhere, but it really is one of the best shmups I've ever played. It takes place in this beautiful sort of fantasy Sylvan world where you are attacking bugs and flying machines and dinosaurs and jellyfish and all sorts of crazy stuff, and it just feels like an amazing romp through nature, covering the screen in this beautiful artistry of these bullets trying not to die. I've always thought that Cave did bullet hell shmups better than anyone else, and I mean, they were some of the first bullet hell games I ever played, and I came to really respect the artistry of bullets in these sort of games. I'm not good at these games, not by any means of measure, and of course part of that's because my controller won't actually let me control it properly, but definitely one of the best things I've ever put on my Xbox 360. The Cave shmups are absolutely wonderful, and the most depressing thing about it is that this one is one of the few that has not been recreated anywhere. Well, that and the combo disc of Muchi Muchi Park and a bar of Pink Sweets, but that game is about $500, so I couldn't exactly test it for this video. Oh, I desperately want it. But the point is that you should play awesome games on your Xbox 360 like Mushihime-sama Futari, and like Raiden Fighters Aces, Quake 4, Project Sylphie, Ninja Blade. Sure, not every game I've listed here is an absolute home run, and part of that's because of all the restrictions I put on myself. I didn't want to include things that were on the PS3 or available on Xbox One because, well, what's the point? Just play them there, I guess. The whole point was that I worry people are going to write off this console for being completely pointless because the Xbox 360 can backwards compatible everything, even though it can only backwards compatible about a quarter of the thing's entire library at best. The fact is, the Xbox 360 had some really amazing games, and a lot of them have been preserved, remastered, remade, or put somewhere else backwards compatible. But whether these games were all that great or not, and yeah, sure, if some of them aren't, I mean, Sneak King? Come on, that's a meme, but it's fun. It still has some unique experiences you won't find anywhere else, and I don't want anyone to write off a console just by virtue of the fact that they think there's nothing on it worth playing. The games I've talked about here today might not be your cup of tea, they might not be the best games ever, they might not be good, but they were games that stuck out to me as things you definitely still need an Xbox 360 for. So please, I'm begging you, don't write off this console, because it did some pretty amazing stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my list of top, I think we're at 37 games on the Xbox 360 fit into a top 10 list, because my brain is kind of attention deficit disorder at times, and I want you to play all the good games ever. So for the love of God, play all the good games, especially Viva Pinata. At some point, I would like to do a list of the best cross-platform games as well, just so if you're getting into the sort of whole console generation, you've got more to play. But if I focus on the exclusives, that means I get an extra list later, and I think I can make a broader list by removing stuff like this honest. So I think everyone wins, and we all get to hear about more awesome games. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play every game I wanted to here. I would have really liked to have tried Concept Saga, as well as Operation Darkness and Morphex. Unfortunately, with the exception of Morphex, those games are not remotely affordable, and I do not have copies of them, nor have I ever seen copies of them. So alas, I couldn't try everything, but I went through everything I owned, and heck, I even picked up Quake 4 at a garage sale like days before I had to record this and played through it in one night. That was an absolute blast. So I'm still learning about the Xbox 360, so I hope you enjoyed. And if you know some awesome Xbox 360 games that I don't know about, let me know, because, I mean, clearly I'm still learning about this system and its awesome exclusives and its very interesting experiences that shouldn't be forgotten and left buried. But either way, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, subscribe to the YouTube channel, see everything else I do. Maybe check out my Twitch. Tell me what you think about this list and other potential lists. Maybe give me some ideas. You know, help feed the algorithm monster so that I actually get seen. That would be nice, please. But seriously, I hope you interact with me in some way, because, you know, it's fun to learn more about interesting games and explore this passion we all share together. And if you really want to make my day, check out the show's PayPal, Patreon, or Ko-fi to help support the show so that, you know, maybe someday I can afford Concept Saga or Operation Darkness, or, you know, can just in general help fund more materials for lists, because I like lists. I just overthink them really, really bad. I've got about a million lists I'd like to do, and every time I start one, I start coming up with like weird questions about, oh, does this count? Does this count? And then I just sort of feel completely demoralized because I get caught on so many technicalities. And now I'm just rambling because I don't know how to end this video and I'm bad at talking. But either way, I hope you enjoyed all this, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Peace out, Internet.